As parents, we are always wondering what that sneeze or cough is with our child. We also feel vulnerable and insecure when having to ask the proper questions when we seek medical care. Parenting is tough. But what my guest today, Sehreen Ali, has done is created an app that enables parents to understand, manage, and predict their child's health. Sleuth is the first platform to combine crowdsourced health stories with AI to give parents comprehensive, evidence backed information about their kids' health and development that can be taken to a pediatrician so you can feel prepared to ask the right questions. You're listening to We Need to Talk. Sehreen, thank you so much for joining me on We Need to Talk today. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So your story is really interesting. And I wanted to have more people on the show that are really in the healthcare space. And, I think it's no secret that specifically in this country, healthcare is our healthcare system is not the greatest. And it's very, I know we're going to have a lot to talk about. It is not where it should be. And that's not to say that people that are medical professionals aren't great. They're incredible medical professionals. It's just the system as a whole in terms of getting care, proper diagnoses, making sure that you're listening to people about their bodies, what they're feeling, and giving them the right test. But even more so, being a parent, which is what we're going to get into, it's made it very difficult because I know as a parent now, I'm a mom of a 3.5-year-old. I'll ask questions about everything. And and my mom was like that too. I mean, she would take me in, I felt like for the doctor for a paper cut. And I was like, I'm fine. But I loved that about her. And so she's really instilled the ask questions, don't be afraid. Just if you feel something's wrong, go forward. So your story really stemmed from your own personal experience as a mother and how you came to start this health startup that we're going to talk about. But I'd love to just hear a little bit of your story and how you got into this space and what happened in your personal life as a mom that made you want to start this health startup Sleuth in order to help parents with diagnosing their kids and having more information when they go to their pediatrician and then go to the doctor, because I think this is a really, really great thing that you've done.
Thank you. I joke that I did not mean to start this company. I had worked for several startups before. I'm like, it's hard. I had a front row seat into how hard it was. And so when you said the word want to start the startup, it's kind of more like, I feel like it literally drops on my lap. So I have two daughters, 9 and 6. When my younger one was about a year old, there were just some things that weren't clicking. And we had I totally agree with you, by the way, about the system. The system hurts everybody, including physicians. But the pediatrician I went to was a little bit more hands-off, which I can totally appreciate in a very intense parenting culture. And I just wasn't getting answers. And so after talking to some parents, I realized actually I should really push. And so what happened when I ended up pushing was I got an answer that I didn't think I was going to get. And then people still couldn't help me. I had to get early intervention. I had to figure out how to get the right types of therapists. And so I had to quit my job, which was a huge financial hit. But also we were in the position where I could do that. And I ended up meeting my co-founder, Alex Leeds, at a startup generator program because I was like, there's a problem, but the other side of the problem is that there's an opportunity. And that opportunity is how do you get better information in the hands of parents who would do anything for their kids, like you're saying.
Yeah, I love that because so many of the things that I enjoy and so many of the things that I've discovered come from personal stories where people found that there was a problem and nobody else was coming up with the solution. So you just had to be proactive and do it. And again, like you said, I didn't mean to start this company, but sometimes you're the person that needs to do it in order to give people the thing that they need. And I think when it comes to, healthcare with your kids, you can Google until you're blue in the face, but there's so much conflicting information. And one of the things that I really like about the app is that you're able to talk to other parents and discuss and share observations, because I think that's one of the blessings of social media is that you can actually see common ground and you can see how, similar your responses are. Like, I love seeing all the memes about toddler parents because I'm like, yep, went through that last week, so it makes you feel a little less alone. So for the people that have been using the app, What has your feedback been? Like, do they feel a little bit more comforted? Do they feel
Totally.
like they're getting answers easier? I would just love to know what the response has been because I
Yeah.
really think that it's great.
The response has been pretty strong, and we're new to the market. And I overwhelmingly hear it makes me feel less alone. So let's take like
Mm,
the specific scenario of a parent who thinks their child might be the only one that's not sitting still in class, the only kid who kind of talks a lot and doesn't take social cues to stop talking. That can feel very isolating as a parent. And so one of the things that we have is a quiz. So it's like a 23 question quiz on ADHD. And you really get to understand your child with data. That's super important in the data aspect. But what ends up happening is like when you look at the data, you realize, oh my gosh, there's so many other kids like my kid, right?
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
what ends up happening is you wonder, am I getting gaslit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like if it's not me and my child, that's the problem. What's the problem? Right? And
Right.
part of the problem is not being heard.
Yes.
And so the other thing that we've heard is that people are starting to take it to their pediatricians, which is what we had hoped people would do, right? They can advocate and they
Mm,
can say, actually, I really do need an answer sooner. When I talk to speech therapists or other experts and pediatricians, they wish that parents came and asked more questions, actually. And so we hope that we can play a role in helping them get to the care that they need quicker.
yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the gaslit thing because I know I've come from a family of educators and my mom was a very empathetic, caring teacher. My sister's a very empathetic, caring teacher, but they have all had experiences with other educators where they make the parents feel like, oh, your child's is a problem child or this or that. But little did they know, they probably just needed to be diagnosed with either ADHD or anxiety or whatever the situation may be. So I feel like as a parent, there's a lot of fear in trying to figure out what's wrong with your child because you also don't want to feel guilty, like, oh, how did I miss this? Or did I do something wrong to make them have this diagnosis or whatever the case may be? So that's why I love that within this app in this community almost that you've built. I feel like it is kind of also a
Yeah,
community as
yeah,
well.
for sure.
People feel a little comforted knowing that no, just kids are kids and this is what happens and it's
Yes,
nothing that you're doing wrong. And honestly, the fact that you're even seeking answers is
yeah,
good parenting because so many people will
exactly.
just, you know what I mean? So many people may just be like, oh, it's this or whatever. And I come from a school, for example, that's very religious. So, pray, they'll just pray, it'll be
Right.
fine. I'm like, no, if something's wrong, something's wrong. So I really love that aspect of it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's we want to be a place where any parent can get answers instead of going down the Google hole, right?
Yeah.
Um, and what's really fun is when we talk to parents, they actually really understand why advice from other parents is good. And we've cleaned it up a lot. So what we've done is we've crowdsourced 62,000 caregiver experiences, and that's what powers our database. And once you have that much information, and you structure it and you do the right data science on it, it's actually really accurate.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of cool, right? It's like inherently better than Facebook because like there's just a lot of noise, but it's also for filling the gap that we felt parents had when it came to just like knowing how your kid is doing at any point in time. And when you know how your child is doing in regular touch points, then it's much easier for you to know when they need extra support, right?
Yeah,
So if
absolutely.
you right, like if you have data about your own child's milestones and developmental milestones, instead of what I felt as a parent, which is this kind of like murky, like okay, like kids who walk early talk late, like this kind of like weird. You're like, is that true? Where did that come from? How did I record this?
Yeah.
Right? And then some of the trackers they fall off after 18 months, right? And yet, when we look at our data, let's say just, and I'm using ADHD a lot, but just as an example, a lot of the first symptoms that parents saw of ADHD in their kids happened at the age of 5, but they were diagnosed much later, right? And so, like, why are we stopping this kind of evidence based observation of our kids when actually it will just help us and them have more peace of mind
Yeah.
through all
Yeah.
7, their entire childhood. And then you could like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you go to doctors and you get this, but I get a lot of like what happened when your child was born? And my younger daughter has not, so I might get it more. It's like, well, what were those first days like, and what were the first years? And I'm like, am I going to be answering these questions for the rest of her life? Probably,
Yeah.
but like, where do you collect it?
Right, right. You know, I'm also curious, just in general, what your experience as a woman of color, as a mom of color, has been dealing with the American healthcare system. Because, I mean, I can definitely speak on it, and to the point where I drive almost an hour to go to my doctor, my OBGYN, because I wanted to find a woman of color so that I felt safe and taken care of and listened to. And same with my daughter's pediatrician. So I'm just curious what your personal experience has been like.
It has been complex. I'm South Asian. There's a lot of South Asian doctors. Um, and that can go either way, frankly. It's not a guarantee. There's a lot of
Yeah.
times where I have to like buck up, wear the nice clothes, even for South Asian doctors. Um, I remember, I always tell the story because for me it's very stark. When my daughter was hospitalized, her neurosurgeon would come in every morning. He was a superstar neurosurgeon, one of the best in the world. And so it kind of felt like I was seeing a celebrity. So you kind of had to make the most of the time. And I had a lot of
Mm.
questions. Like I learned to ask questions when I became a mother. I was not a good self advocate, but once I had children, I learned I had to do that. So he would round at 6 in the morning. And if you didn't catch him, you lost him. And so I would wake up like 20 minutes earlier, change out of my PJs and wear my normal clothes, and then hop back into bed with my daughter because I slept in a hospital bed with her. Right. And a lot
Mm.
of it was like to be taken seriously. And I remember a couple times people were like, "Are you a physician?" And I was like, "No." And I don't, I know that you think you're giving me a compliment by asking me that, but actually what's underneath that is kind of insulting. Like you can only be well educated about your child's condition
Yeah.
if you're a physician. And I was
If
like,
you're, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and this is the thing. And I never, when I was reading up on your startup and the reason behind it, I never took from it that you didn't trust doctors. I never got that.
good. We do trust doctors. That's good. I'm glad you didn't
Right,
get that.
right.
Yeah.
You know, but I could see how some people might jump to that conclusion, but it's like, no, dive deep, look at the reasons behind it, right? We all want to make sure that our kids are getting the best care and that we're also coming in equipped, because you can trust doctors but still kind of be ahead of whatever's going to happen in that room. And I think that that's what you're setting parents up for success,
Yeah.
which I think a lot of parents don't go in. I mean, being a first time parent, for example, you know nothing. I mean, I remember when John and I came home with our daughter and we're like, well, like
I
we just
guess it's
have this
us.
human, we got to keep her alive. And
Yeah.
you feel it's very vulnerable and it's scary. Like you're
Very.
literally taking care of a human, and you're responsible for making sure not only that they stay healthy, but that they're also like a good contributing
Mhm.
member of society, right? So I
Totally.
think that being able to set parents up for success medically is a huge path forward, because I mean, even just looking at where we've advanced, medically and with technology, it's
Yeah.
great, but this is a really great step for parents, especially those ones that also may be afraid to initially ask the
Totally.
pediatrician in the first place. So this is a really great step. Um, thinking, speaking of like parenting advice and people being afraid to ask questions, did you ever feel as a mom that before you even started this company that you were given just constant bad advice from just people around you? I mean, I know that that's kind of an obvious question, but I think it's really interesting. This is the bad part of social media, right? Like everybody has an opinion on what you should
Yeah.
do or what you
Yeah.
should how you should move forward. So what has your experience been with that? Because I have stories for days.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I became a mom 9.5 years ago, so Instagram was not as prolific in parenting advice back then.
Gotcha.
But what I did feel was a huge gap addressing my parenting style. So I remember I wrote Rage. I like or ragefully wrote this article that I put on Medium, and it was like in reaction to a Pottery Barn magazine that fell on my doorstep, and it was all kids that didn't look like mine, all with names that didn't sound like mine. And I was like, look, you are missing a massive demographic here. Like,
Yeah.
the majority, right? And like, how are we still at the place where like everyone's like, oh yeah, my name's not on that keychain, mom. Like, why not? Don't I like it's like, come on.
Yeah.
And I feel like I now with the parenting advice, like we went through something really hard a couple of years ago with my younger daughter, and that's really changed. It's given me permission to stand in my parenting style, which is
Mm,
a little bit less like New York City is intense. Like the coasts I feel like are intense about things. Um, and I know personally I grew up a perfectionist. I wanted to achieve, I got good grades, that kind of stuff. And I have now decided that the way that I parent has to be a little bit different. Right. So
mhm.
standing in the power of saying like my job as a parent is to have my daughters really understand and discover who they are as people and not achieve, I feel like is where I feel alone
Mm.
in the
Yeah, that
parenting
makes
world.
sense.
And I think
Yeah.
it's kind of informed by disability. My daughter has some disabilities, and she has a type of disability, they're getting better. But when I was in that world, I really felt like, what? Like we judge small humans on their performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's strange.
It is strange. It is strange. And I do wonder if you have felt as a mom of a child with special needs. I'm trying to find the right word, but uh, do you feel that you're treated differently?
I just think that there's like five different versions of me, more than I get.
Mm.
I'm very good at code switching, right? Like
Mm.
any of us are. Like
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, 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 yeah. Kind of
it's
need
just
to in this country.
yeah,
Unfortunately, it's yeah,
yeah.
it's a
So it's just
necessary
one more
trait.
thing. It's one more thing I can code switch on. I which is hard, right? Right. Like then you
Yeah.
always the people that you're comfortable with, then it's like a new set of people that I feel comfortable with. But I think that what I really wish that we would move towards is an embracing that everyone has, right? And so every child has a need, every human has a need. And I heard this speaker, she was remarkable. She was blind, and she had other disabilities. And she's like, look, even sighted people have needs. Sighted people need light. And I was like, yes, if you could embrace the words of need, I need sleep, I need food.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's such a great and beautiful and inclusive way to think of it. That we just all have needs, and some of
Yeah.
them they're just different needs. We don't all have the same needs. I mean, I also think of it in the same way that, like, as a Black woman in America, like the hair products that I need are different, but we all need
Yeah.
hair products to like get through our day. But it's definitely gonna be different from I love that. That's great. You have to send me who that speaker is because
Yes,
I
I
think
will.
that's such a
Yeah.
wonderful way. Um, so I'm curious, the research that you did in order to create the app, was there any data that surprised you the most?
Um, that is a good question. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that surprised me. Um, but what I think we were so focused on the type of data and the way that we got it that that's what's always top of mind for me. So
Hmm.
our data is representative of the US. It was very important to us that anyone's child would be reflected in our data in terms of income, geography, and race and ethnicity. So that's something I'm really proud of.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's what is interesting is that when you look at specific conditions, that the symptoms that a parent observed and when they got a diagnosis, there's always a large gap. And I think that's not common knowledge right
Mm.
now, which is that many kids have chronic ongoing conditions, even when they're mild, and most of them will be mild. But the path to diagnosis is long. Across the board, it's long.
Right,
Um,
right.
and then I'm sure a lot of us would think, even if it's a chronic ear infection in our child, we'd be like, oh my God, this has been going on for like a year and a half.
Yeah,
That's a long diagnosis.
yeah, yeah.
And that's something that I think we can really help.
It's interesting that you say the gap between, the symptoms and then the diagnosis. I think that's what you were saying. It's
Mhm.
interesting because I can only imagine how long some of, like you said, that's a long time, for a chronic illness. I can only imagine how long some things go on for parents before they even
Mhm.
ask for help, right? That's the
True.
first step.
So true.
And then start doing the research and then trying to like do a process of elimination and then finally taking it to your doctor. So I hope that with you having this resource for them, that'll help kind of, close the
Yeah.
gap a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's a lot of times like when you think about how much pediatricians have to cover for, like who else manages a changing body from literally the moment of birth to the age of 17 to the moment that you go to
Right.
college.
Yeah.
We're asking a lot from pediatricians. They're not well resourced. They have limited appointments. And when I talk to pediatricians, they say, I wish parents asked me their questions at the beginning of the appointment, not the end. Right. There's this
Right.
navigational skills that you have that you kind of learn a little bit too late. You only learn from experience, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true.
Right. It's like I didn't know, like, so for example, people who might suspect that their child has autism, they have to know to ask for the MChat. How do you know that?
Right.
How do you know?
Right. And you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's why parenting obviously is a very, very difficult thing. Because obviously there's a host of diagnoses, diseases, illnesses, whatever the case may be, that are just running rampant, right? Like it could be anything. So if you don't know to ask certain questions or what to look for, of course that just puts you in a very tough position as a parent because you
Yeah.
didn't know to ask. You could
Yeah.
think that I know it's funny looking back at just a lot of interactions that I had with parents when I was a preschool teacher and looking at some of the kids' behavior that they would just kind of, you know, shrug it off like, oh, maybe he didn't sleep today. Or I was like, this is an ongoing thing. And it's okay to think, okay, maybe I need to get my child tested, or maybe I need to do this. They might have a learning disability. And some parents were kind of offended when you
Yeah.
would bring up that suggestion. It's like there should be no shame in just wanting to know how to help your child navigate the world in the best possible way for what
Totally.
they need. And
Totally.
I as a parent now looking back, I'm like, that's what it was. It was shame. It was shame and
So
it was
much.
guilt because you don't want to think anything's wrong with your
Yeah.
child because then it's on you, right? But we don't know. I mean, again, there's so many things that are just in the world. It's not your fault. Parents, it's not your fault. I just want
Not your
them to hear that. It's
fault.
not their fault, you
Yeah.
know?
Like children come in as their own people. Like it's funny, the daycare story to me is very interesting. Because I just remembered a story from when my older daughter was little and the daycare she was like one of the few kids of color at her preschool. Like she's still on the website. And it's
Mhm.
very
Oh my
funny.
gosh.
Um,
And she's
and
9
so
now?
she's not. It's very funny. So and I think that there are these dynamics that we kind of felt sometimes, right? Like you always also as families of color, there are things that you can't explain to other people about the dynamics you feel in the setting about
Absolutely.
your kid, and you want to be taken seriously even as a parent. So I felt that a lot. But I used to send her kind of the same food every day. And the daycare one day was like, look, maybe you should have some variety. It's like, okay, fine. Agreed, but my kid doesn't eat that. My daughter does not like foods with texture. Like when I look back, I did exactly what she needed.
Yeah.
She does
Yeah.
not, she will not eat banana even now, and it's funny because sometimes we think about kids like in the scenario of the daycare, what I would love if someone went on Sleuth and looked at a quiz on like sensory sensitivity. It's not a diagnosis. It's not even the amount, the percentage of kids that will get a diagnosis, thankfully, is low, right? Right. Like most people, and I say thankfully not because there's anything wrong with the kid, but really because it's really dealing with the medical system.
Right.
That's really the issue.
Right.
But just to really, what we're trying to do is like help parents actually just kind of understand their kid with analysis and insight and data. And it's like, if I had what we're building 10 years ago, I'd be like, you know what? I'm pretty sure my daughter has a sensory sensitivity. Not a diagnosis. I just understand something.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
I don't need to
No,
send bananas to
absolutely.
daycare.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So with the app, take us through what happens. I know you talked about the quiz, but what are some other things when people sign up for the app? Like, what do they do? What is the interface like? Like, how does it help them? How do they search for things? Just curious how it all works.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you onboard, we ask you questions about different topics on your child's health that you would like to get more information about, whether it's sleeping or crying or tantrums. And then you take a set of really fast quizzes, and what you get are scores for your child to see how they're doing. And we're very sensitive that we're not comparing. We're just trying to help you understand your child with data and insight. So you get scores, and then you can see how children on Sleuth that are like your child in age and gender, and even condition, if that's where you are, how they score. And so you can situate your child and say, oh, okay, this is where we are. If I take the quiz again in 2 weeks, I can see if there are any changes. And if it continues to be something that I want more attention, I'll take it to my pediatrician. But what's also cool is that let's say your child has a lot of tantrums at the age of 5. What you'll find out on Sleuth is that it's totally normal. That's actually peak tantrum is age 5, which is counterintuitive. We think it's 3 or 4. It's not, it's 5.
Oh, great.
And
Nice. So I
I
have
know,
another
I know.
2 years. Yeah. I was
I
like,
know.
good to know. Let me just get ready. I was like, I
Right.
thought we were going to start getting out of it, but thanks.
Right. They're just more mature at 5. The tantrums seem more like mature tantrums, but they're more, they peak then. And so you
Interesting.
can
Interesting.
actually see the prediction of that symptom over time
Mm,
because we have that much data. So we can say kids like yours with this is how it goes in the future. And so we're
that's
really
amazing.
trying to also just like give people peace of mind, like this will pass, like the crying will pass.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest thing, at least for us. Me and my husband is like, we're like, oh my God, when is she going to get past this? But it's just part of the game. It's part of what happens. They go through milestones every year and they grow and then eventually they become teenagers that don't talk to you.
Oh no.
I
Yes, I
know. And I
know. I
people say that all
know.
the time. I'm like, I think it's gonna happen though, because I definitely remember just being in my room when I was a teenager, for sure, for sure.
But I listened
So
to
I
the
mean,
podcast with you and your mom, and clearly it all
oh
works.
yes, yes, yes. My mom is a saint, and I fully mean that. She's just incredible. I'm very, very grateful for her, and I think she's definitely influenced my parenting style a lot, and my husband's
I
parenting
love
style,
it.
because her and my dad, they live down the street, so they're able
Amazing.
to be with Sienna a lot. So I mean, it sounds like the app is becoming very, very successful for you. So what are long-term goals for it? Like, where would you like to see it go from here, at least?
I mean, I have my ambition is for it to transform kids' health. There's a lack of research, there's a lack of funding, and I do expect at some point in the future that we are going to be able to really share deep insights about what children's lives are like and where we can help them feel better. Particularly around like mental health. And we know that now finally in the news, people are talking about kids. We never really talked about kids before COVID.
Right.
I think in the short term, what I think of us as is like an organizing force for kids' health. So I would like people to come on Sleuth. And when they do need more information from an expert in person, they can find that on us too. That's a
Yeah.
big build, but I think that's where we really want to be there with the parent to help them get to wherever they need to go.
So, for anyone listening that is now interested in using this app, is it available anywhere, or is there a website as well? Where can they find all the information to
Yes.
download Sleuth?
So it's available both on Apple and Android. So just look for Sleuth Child Health Tracker. And if you go on the website, hellosleuth.com, you can also use a QR code to download the app. And I will be happy to share a code with your community as well. So I'll send it to you.
Wonderful. Yes, I'll send it to me and we'll put that in the show notes and post it on the Instagram. So, Sehreen, thank you so much. I'm so impressed with all of this, and I just love that you found a need and you went forward with it. It's great, and I just wish you all the success with this. So, thank you so much for sharing your story with me and my listeners.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.